Portions of our programming have been pre-recorded. The Good Neighbor Network, WGNS, Murfreesboro, Smyrna. Flagship station for MTSU Sports. News Radio WGNS, Murfreesboro. The views and opinions on this show are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of WGNS, its management, other hosts, or advertisers.
And they are my views, I'm proud to say, and but they won't be all my views tonight because our guest is going to have some views of his own, and he's known for stating his opinion, and he is not shy about it. You remember him, you know him, local attorney here in Murfreesboro, right up there on the square. Ken Berger. Ken, glad to have you back. Your headphones are underneath there.
Thank you for the invitation.
You may not be able to. Okay, you got them?
Yeah, good, I got them. If I don't need them, I won't use them. But
okay, whatever.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's here. We're going to talk about a case recently that he had for one of our local citizens right here in Murfreesboro, and I'll let him share with you what is going on. And also, we have another case that he has been in the middle of. He sent me a bunch of things this week. I have him here on my phone, but I didn't want to. Sometimes my phone will open these up, sometimes it won't. Okay, so. We're going to have him talk to you about that. And, Ken, how long have you been in business? I was just wondering.
Over 40 years. It flies by.
More than 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. I'm getting old. A geriatric lawyer.
I'm telling you, I guess. Somebody said once it's something you just can't, you just don't retire.
The truth is I need to retire. And I started my plan, when I put the little jazz radio station on 5 years ago.
Right.
That was my retirement plan. Jim Gilmore and I had been friends for years and years and had decided we were going to do that. And I think he was planning on retiring and I was. And I got a lot of hobbies. I got a long list of hobbies, everything from, ham radio to chickens to solar panels.
I didn't know you did ham radio.
I like to work with wood. I have a lot of hobbies, so I thought, I won't have any trouble keeping busy if I decide to retire. But the problem is, one of my hobbies is trying lawsuits, and I love it, enjoy it. And I don't know, maybe it's a combination of ego and greed, or greed and ego, and it keeps pushing me forward.
I don't know, but there's something
in the water. I need to retire. I'm old.
Yeah, I had 3 calls Friday.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you about them later. It comes in waves. And I appreciate it, but sometimes you would like to sit in the rocking chair just a little bit and put your feet up in front of the fire.
You're right. But the problem is the timetable, the stress of the deadlines is what I don't like. Yeah. Honestly, I have to say, as I've gotten older, I feel. I've told people this. That I feel in the mornings. I feel sharper now, I think, than I was when I was 50, and it's,
really.
But I get fatigued late in the afternoon. I don't know if it's that COVID thing that hit me, Judy and me, a couple of years ago. But
I know you had a time getting over that. Judy your wife got over it before you did. I think you remember. And a lot of the guys I talked to, the wives got over it quicker. But the guys,
I don't know, 1 or 2 afternoons a week, not every day, thankfully. 1 or 2 afternoons a week, that fatigue will hit me. And I go home, sit down, rest, and I feel good. I have the experience that, that comes with all of the years of doing this, and you've become more comfortable with experience. And so, the trade-off is youthful energy versus wisdom and experience.
Wisdom and experience,
Wouldn't
that's
it be
right.
nice to have youthful energy at the same time you have the wisdom?
When you were 25 or 30 and have the wisdom to know when to keep your mouth shut and when to open it.
Yeah.
And for me, I would have had to keep it shut a whole bunch.
Yeah, we all can say that, I guess.
Of course, Ken and Judy, and you work with Jim Gilmore. Jim has helped you so much immensely on your nonprofit station.
Yeah.
WQJZ.
103.9.
103.9.
Yeah.
And that's how I heard about this. I flipped over there one night. I keep you on between WGNS and you. It's back and forth. And you mentioned this very case we're going to talk about. Yep. And I said, wow, I got to get him. I want to get you on to talk about this. And this is the case that involves the a particular firm out of Memphis, I believe.
The Wampler law firm.
Right.
Wampler Sorensen firm.
And they were issuing letters to the thing about, and these were mostly the small business people, because the lady you had up here was a personal friend of ours. Well, I knew her when she was a baby. Her family was personal friends of ours, the Beasley family, and Morgan B. Newman now. She's married with children. And I knew these people, and this bunch is not. They're not a bunch of slap shot people. I mean, everything.
Quality people, responsible
right.
businessmen.
Right.
If you'd like for me to give you the backdrop on that, because it's sort of an odd technical
Let's get
topic.
into that. Let me get into this, and we'll do
Good deal.
that.
Okay.
Okay. Is that all right with you?
I'll
Thank
take
you
this,
very much.
Ed, I'll take over if you don't.
Well, you can certainly. You've got enough experience.
Maintain control. I'll take over.
I think we'll be all right tonight, unless Jackson decides to run us out of here. But for right now, my name is Edwin Lee Raymer, and yes, I'm still a private investigator. Jackson's on the board. Welcome aboard.
This is the Edwin Lee Raymer Show with your host, Ed Raymer, on your Good Neighbor station, News Radio, WGNS.
And we're glad to be with you. This is the Edwin Lee Raymer Show. I'm your host, Ed Raymer, and this show is produced at Studios WGNS, AM 1450, 100.5, 101.9 FM, right here in the heart of the great volunteer state, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Now, you can reach me and Ken tonight with your questions, your comments, or your thoughts at 615-893-1450. That's 615-893-1450. And you can also text us your message at that number. And our producer, Jackson, will be glad to read it over the air. He'll hand it to me or Ken, and we'll read it for you. For those of you who do not wish to be heard live on the air. And now, you can also watch us via YouTube at WGN, at News Radio WGNS. We are on live right now. All of them our broadcasts are taped there. All of them. Angela, I talked to Angela just very briefly. I got to see her tonight, just when Ken and I walked in together, and she's doing a great job. She's been on there a little less than we have, but she does a great job with Simplicity Network, does a great job, and she's just a fine person. And she is Angela Bingham of the Bingham Sisters. If you ever heard her and her sisters sing, they are very good. They've been singing since they came out of the crib. So, and you can download the WGNS app and take WGNS with you wherever you go listen, whenever you wish. Ken Berger's my guest tonight. Do you have an app for your station yet,
We
Ken?
do. It's we wouldn't have an app. No, I jumped to that answer quicker than I should. We
You're
don't
on
have
the
an app.
internet, obviously.
We have a website.
You have the
We
website.
But
Yeah,
it's
right.
a pretty modest website for
Right.
It's WQJZ-LP.com.
You know, I've never checked it. Well, I don't believe, if I have, it's been a long time.
We have internet listeners from Quebec,
It's
Canada,
amazing the station here does too.
the Caribbean,
They've got some folks,
to Europe.
I think, in Switzerland that
It's
listen,
weird
or
how that
Ireland or
every
wherever.
now and then we'll get an email from
Yeah.
Wales, from Nevis down in the
It's unbelievable.
Alberta, Canada. The young lady down
Canada,
in the Caribbean actually is down there in veterinary school. She's from Murfreesboro, so that explains some of that. But she had listened.
She
to us
likes to
before.
get a taste of home every once in a while.
It's a little slice of Murfreesboro occasionally,
Right.
she said. But some European streaming service, jazz streaming service devoted to jazz, picked us up without inquiry or permission or anything. Which we don't care. Jim or I don't care if they.
Sure, right.
But they picked us up and started feeding us, and I think that's where a lot of the European listeners have come from. Now, why they picked us
Really?
up, how they picked us up, I don't know the technology.
Who knows?
But it's
Who knows?
interesting. All of a sudden, we started getting the occasional. It's not frequent. 2 or 3 a year, 3 or 4 years.
You know, I will run into people just about every week, that will come up to me and, hey, heard that guest you had on about a week ago. They listen. A lot of people listen to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not into that. I don't know about you. This thing has passed me by a long time ago.
I like podcasts.
I walked back into the station. I said, where are the 8 tracks? That's when I came back up here. And you know what I'm talking about. Everything used
That's
to be
my
that. And we've
generation.
got some of that old machinery still. Dalton keeps it, and Bart wants to keep it, of course, and it is part of history. It's part of how radio worked. But, it has changed, but I'll have someone just about every week. I had people this week. Who you having on Sunday night? And I think it's part of the reason the station, as I've told you, keeps me hanging out. It keeps me hanging around. What are you going to do next?
It's one of the things I've said, Ed, and I repeat it as often as because I mean it. WGNS does local radio right.
Right.
AM radio, people talk about fading, but I don't think it ever will fade. And as long as people do AM radio across the country the way they're doing it here in Murfreesboro at WGNS, it serves a great purpose, serves a function that you don't hear on FM. Typically.
You and I have heard this all of our lives. I'm reaching that age now. I'm 66, okay? And I know I only look like I'm in my 30s, but you wipe that smile off.
I would have never guessed.
Yeah, I bet you wouldn't. I've worked for you longer than that. But when FM came out, well, that's the end of AM radio. Okay, so AM may have had a lull for a while, and then all of a sudden started to come back. And then you had FM stereo. Okay, well, that's definitely the end of AM. That's all of AM. We won't have that no more. Not so.
It's true, not true.
Then you've had the internet, and you've had compact disc, you've had CDs and all this stuff. And there are a lot of people that just listen to music, and that's one thing I like about your station. It's good music. And occasionally you throw that blues in there. You throw a little B.B. King or a little Willie Nelson, and I like that. But, you never know when it's coming. So I wish you'd keep your phone handy and let me know when the next one's coming on.
It's on a random rotation. But seriously, the AM radio connection is it's the pulse of the local community.
And of course, you are FM, of course.
Yeah, we're FM on 103.9.
Right, yeah.
But and I know WGNS has what they call translators that are on FM. But primarily, I love the way they keep their finger on from early in the morning to late in the evening. People who want to know about what's going on in Murfreesboro. Well, that's the direct, quick connection is WGNS.
Well, and that's what we try to do here. And we're going to touch on something tonight that is a national issue. And occasionally I do that. And I've had people, hey, why don't you get, I've got a good friend of mine, Hooper Peniel, and I guess Hooper may be listening tonight. And, it's, we got to go national. You got to syndicate that thing. But I've always talked about local issues, just like we're talking about here with Morgan's case. People that, I've been here since 1980. Me and my two younger brothers, we know a lot of people here in here. We're 44 years now. You know how it is. You've been in business that long. You get to know a lot of people. Some of them we wish we didn't know. Most of them,
we want to know everybody.
Most of them, that's true, and but you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
And you get to know a lot of people. You say, well, I don't really know anyone on the national scale. I really don't.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe one of these days it will. Now tell us about your case with Morgan. I know she's bound to be happy and relieved at the same, probably more relieved. This was not necessarily about suing for a bunch of money. I take it.
No, it's an odd. It's kind of an odd scenario, and
run it by us again, please.
Yeah, the reason I welcome the opportunity to talk about it, it's not to come on here and brag about a great victory, or as I said, I'm on my downhill slide. I'm easing out of law practice, and I'm doing anything but soliciting cases. I'm turning away more than I can possibly take. But this thing struck a nerve with me. I know I think it strikes a nerve with anyone who hears it. The background on this, let me just say this to begin with.
Sure.
There's this great law, this wonderful law that the federal Congress passed many years ago called the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Which is a good law.
It's a very worthy law. It guarantees disabled persons to have access to public accommodations. And if it weren't for that law, there are a lot of people who wouldn't do it. They would not make those accommodations for moral or other good purposes.
Financial.
So it's a wonderful law, but as I said, in that little spot we ran on ours, it's like a lot of good things in life, it can be abused, and that's what has happened. This Memphis law firm, in the most disreputable, I think, inappropriate, unprofessional way, have exploited this Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Let me tell you this. Starting about a year ago, several Murfreesboro businessmen started getting letters from the Wampler law firm. Most of them were from a young lady attorney named Rebecca Hutto, Hutto. Ms. Hutto is one of several lawyers there with the Wampler firm, and they would prepare a complaint with the business person's name on it, and they would write a letter, and that letter would say, "Dear," and they sent one to my friend Bill Taylor down here at the Taylor Karate
Bill.
Place, and they sent one to Miss Newman, whose family, Beasley and Associates, owns the Davis place down here on Broad Street, and several other
which
businesses.
I was personally familiar with.
Up and down Broad
struck
Street.
Me, yeah, right.
Up and down Broad Street. So they'd send a letter to them, and in that letter they would say, one of our disabled testers, they call them. They send these people around the country like Johnny Appleseed to see things that spot things that they think might be potential infractions. And so then, having spotted that, they send this very intimidating letter saying, here's the lawsuit. United States, it's very intimidating. United States District Court, Middle District of Tennessee. In this case, it was David Jordan was this particular tester's name. He's filed, dozens of cases for this particular law firm. David Jordan, poor gentleman in a wheelchair, but he says, I attempted to access one of your properties, Miss Newman, couldn't access it, couldn't get in there because of the incline, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. Pure nonsense. It's as
pure nonsense. In Morgan's case, I know it. Yeah.
Anyway, couldn't get in there, and so the Wampler lady attorney, Miss Hutto, says to Miss Newman, if you do not comply immediately, we're going to file this suit in federal court. You got 30 days or so to comply.
Right.
But the kicker to it, no, right now we want you to send us an attorney's fee for $8,000. This is an upfront attorney's fee for $8,000.
This is not a fine. This is a fee.
This is a pay the lawyer only. Keep in mind 2 or 3 things. Number one, lawyers can't split fees with clients.
Right.
It's highly unethical. You can't take a fee and then say the client gets half of that. Highly unethical to do that. You can take a case on a contingent fee basis, but you can't collect a statutory fixed fee and give the client half of that. That's illegal. Second point about that is that Title III makes it highly illegal to try to collect damages. You can't, zero damages under Title III. All you can do is file the suit to force compliance, and only to the extent that the attorney has expended time that they can prove to the court, filing pleadings, doing research, going to the site to see, trying the case in court. Only to that extent can the attorney collect any fee at all. So, and the law is, if you send the letter and the person doesn't comply, or does comply, send the letter and the person immediately complies, there's no fee involved. That makes it moot, they say.
Sure.
So that's the backdrop of the law involving this. But this Wampler firm, I'm telling you, hand over fist, they were taking one case right after another. And this is where the damned if you do, damned if you don't dilemma comes in. Lawyers who are well accustomed to trying cases in federal court are not cheap. It's very intimidating. It's down there in Nashville, and the drive
and it is
down
very
there,
expensive.
And it
warrants an attorney's expense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
because
but the idea is the poor businessman, the poor Murfreesboro businessman is saying, well, do I send $8,000 to Miss Hutto and the Wampler firm in Memphis, or do I go hire Ken Berger for $3,000 or $4,000? And with him not being able to guarantee me that we would win, and so maybe the best thing for me to do is just write that easy check to the Wampler firm. So dozens and dozens and dozens of people wrote those checks.
Yes, sir.
To the tune of $5,000 to $8,000, and Miss Newman got her back up stiff about it. She was not gonna let him run over her.
She had enough of her granddaddy in her. I could tell that.
She came in and she asked me what I thought her chances were. I said, I think your chances are very, very good, but I don't make guarantees. I have won too many I should have lost too many I should have won. I go in and do the best I can. I like to brag about my great victories, and I don't talk so much about my terrible defeats.
Right.
But if you're an honest trial lawyer, you'll admit you've got them both in your your quill.
In your briefcase.
It happens.
It happens.
So anyway, long and short of that is that we essentially we filed a defense to it and essentially countersued, and we had the hearing before the chief, presiding United States District Judge in Nashville. Back in mid-December, Waverly Crenshaw, one of the finest federal judges in the country, and he did not take kindly to the Wampler business model of shaking down Murfreesboro businessmen, and he wrote a very strident opinion. He dismissed Wampler's suit against Miss Beasley and her family. Miss Newman and the Beasley family.
Right, yes.
Not only did he dismiss it, but he scathingly commented in his opinion that he had seen something like 200 of these suits come through the federal court there in Nashville, and he knew there were many more in Memphis, and that he was very suspect of, as he quoted me, the apparent shakedown concept that had been adopted by this Memphis law firm.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's the long and short of the story. And I, as I said, I welcome the opportunity to say to anybody who gets one of these letters from the Wampler law firm, and don't call me, call your lawyer. And if your lawyer wants to talk to me about it, I'll give him the benefit of the research we did on it. Although I have a strong feeling after the approximate hour and 15 minutes that Miss Hutto stood at the at the podium and could not answer any of, much less all of.
She really could not answer this.
She stumbled around. Stumbled around for an hour and 15 minutes to the point I was feeling sorry for her.
That's ridiculous.
They have. What makes me mad about that, Ed? She's a nice young lady. I mean, she's a young lady, 2 years out of law school. Mm-hmm. She's not the culprit in this. She's working for some old white men.
They're using her.
They're usual story. They're behind the scenes running things, putting somebody else out there on the front line to take the heat and the embarrassment and the humiliation, and they rake in those big $8,000 fees and give her obviously some, as a young associate, some small amount of it. So, I don't take any great satisfaction in attacking other law firms.
That is, I was going to ask you, I know you did not want to do this in your gut. It's something any attorney.
Well, I've never done that in that context before, and no, I didn't like doing it. The truth is, I don't know what the final chapter will be of this. They have appealed that decision by Judge Crenshaw, and it will be, or I guess over the next 6 months, it will go to the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And again, I'll reiterate what I said a minute ago. I feel like the merits of the case are strong. Common sense, right and wrong, should support upholding Judge Crenshaw's opinion on that. But strange things happen in the court system.
You never know.
I feel certain that the Sixth Circuit panel will uphold his decision, but it's been a lot of litigation at the Supreme Court in various angles on these ADA issues. There was a case back in October, and to tell you how crazy this has gotten, a case last October that involved a young woman who was indeed handicapped, tragically handicapped, but one of the requirements of the law is that hotels must have on their website information about how their properties are ADA accessible, how they are ADA compliant and handicap accessible. So there developed a bit of a cottage industry. This is what people lose confidence in the legal system, this crazy stuff. They developed a cottage industry where these so-called ADA testers, they wouldn't even go to the hotel. In the Loeffler, Laufler case that was argued in the U.S. Supreme Court back in October, in the Loeffler case, this young lady would get up in the morning and she would go to her computer and she would go to the websites of all of these hotels. And if they didn't have the exact, precise technical requirements met on their ADA disclosure, she had her law firm that she was working with. Right. And literally thousands and thousands of cases filed on behalf of this young lady named Ms. Loeffler. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed, one of those judges up in New York had said enough is enough and ruled against her. And there's some technical standing issues that I'm not going to go and launch into a seminar on this, but there were several bases upon which the New York court ruled against Ms. Loeffler, and it ultimately made its way up through the intermediate appellate system, and the U.S. Supreme Court said that she could not prevail. But that issue and several other ADA issues are still a bit cloudy and unresolved, and there's this tension there. There's this need to recognize the sanctity of that ADA law, that disabled people need to be protected. So that you got that strong public policy decision over here, and then over on the right you've got weasel attorneys who figure out, well, how can I hustle big dollars out of this with low exposure? And that's those are the two competing public policy considerations.
And to let people know, they were coming after people like me,
small businessmen, not the big people like Walmart.
People like, for example, to name Walmart, Kroger, Publix. These companies that build these shopping centers.
Well, they got attorneys on staff who fire back.
That's probably one of the first things they put in an architectural drawing. Is where's your handicap access?
You're right.
You're going to have it. We're not fighting it. We're not trying to get around it for not only for just to get in and out the door, but for restroom accessibility and all that.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing they put
right.
down.
Walmart
but they can
Kroger.
afford it.
Walmart and Kroger have their staff attorneys. They don't
Right.
have to, like a local family business, struggle with, well, what do we do? Do we go down here and do we go ahead and pay the shakedown firm, the Wampler firm? We pay them the $8,000 that they're demanding up front, even though they have not done any time on the lawsuit.
Exactly.
They were using a standard pro forma complaint. Do we go ahead and write that big check to them, or do we go down the street and try to find a lawyer? I don't know how many attorneys in Murfreesboro practice in federal court. They probably have 200 in and around this area, and I would doubt that more than 20 or 30
Not many.
practice.
Not many that I've known in my experience with all
But,
you guys and
you
gals.
know, do I write the big check to lawyer A or to lawyer B? That's the
Right.
damned if you do, damned if you don't dilemma, upon which the Wampler's shakedown business model was built. Force them into making that, shake them up with the letter and the lawsuit with their name already on there with the U.S. District Court.
Because no one likes to get a letter from you guys. Yeah. It's kind of like mine. I don't, being a private investigator, I never sent out Christmas cards. You know,
I'm surprised.
It's pretty hard to do. You know, honey, who's this Ed Reimer at Private Investigations? That needs to go into the fireplace quick. Right. You know, but I mean, what? Let me ask you. Let's say I received one and said, "Trash can it." What would happen? What if no one ever answered these people?
Well, you know what a lot of people, most people are responsible businessmen. They're not going to throw that into the wastebasket. But if they did, they would simply sue them. I mean, as Ms. Beasley, Ms. Newman did exactly that. She ignored them. She said, "I'm just not going to pay any attention to them. I'm going to ignore them." Well, next thing you knew, she was being served with process by a process service, so she was sued. And that's what brought her to my office through a mutual friend. I didn't know Ms. Newman from anybody. But
really?
They sued her, and so she had no choice. You have 30 days to answer, or they take a default against you, including for the fees. So
they perfectly legal.
They throw the gauntlet down, and you either you ignore that party invitation, you'll regret it later. So she had no choice. And
of course, as we know, just because something is legal don't mean it's ethical.
Or makes
We've
sense.
seen it. You and I have seen it most of our adult life.
Or makes common sense. That's
Jackson's going to come in here. We're going to go to our first series of breaks. Ken, thank you for doing this. This is important, and it's important to our merchants here because most businesses in communities, especially like ours, they are small, but they're mom and pop businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether it be a local restaurant, a bar, a clothing store, whatever, we've got them all around the square.
And the profit margin every month is tight. They don't have money to write out $8,000 attorney's fee checks.
$8,000 is pretty big. That's a lot of lettuce, you know. You know. So, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Mr. Ken Berger's been good enough to be with us. We're going to talk about another case that's coming up that he's already been working on as well. Jackson's on the board. I'm Ed Reimer for the Edwin Lee Reimer Show. Stay with us, and we'll be right back. Hello, everyone. It's Ed with Private Investigations in Middle Tennessee. You know, if you just need someone checked out on a background check, tag them a run, or if you need someone full-fledged to follow, give us a call. You can reach me at 615-390-7219. That's 615-390-7219, or check out our website at piofmt.com. That's piofmt.com.
I felt so alone, scared, angry, full of self-pity. I just wanted to die, so I took another drink. Then I heard about AA and went to my first meeting. The people there talked about those same feelings. I was no longer alone. They gave me help to stop drinking and hope to start living. Alcoholics Anonymous, it works. Look us up. Check your phone book, newspaper, or aa.org.
Hey, this is Ed, everybody. Want to tell you about a sponsor of ours. We've got Complete Yard Care. Their slogan is, "We do it all." Low maintenance landscape design.
retaining walls, tree removal, stump grinding, lawns cut, mulching, landscaping. Now you can reach them at 615-785-0384. Or you can look them up on the web at CompleteYardCareTN.com. They have a 5-star ranking on Google. That's Complete Yard Care. We do it all.
Go to J. Mullins Jewelers and check out their collection of reactor watches. They're located at 352 West Northfield Boulevard right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And also custom-made jewelry. If you want it, they can make it for you. Also gifts for any and all occasions. Weddings, graduations, family reunions, anniversaries, all of it. That's J. Mullins Jewelers, 352 West Northfield Boulevard right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Thank you, and we are back with Attorney Ken Berger here in town. Now, Ken, one more question on this. We were just talking. These people with this, Americans with Disabilities thing out of Memphis, they're still in operation only in other states.
Well, they're still operating in Tennessee. Judge Crenshaw didn't issue an injunction. He didn't shut them down. He laid out in that opinion, by the way, if anybody wants to see it, it's a matter of public record on file. But he gave them what I would describe a severe scolding, and told them that he used the word that their ethical practices were suspect, and made findings, excuse me, in the opinion, essentially what they were doing were wrong. I mean,
sure.
And I'll say this, and then I'm not to get too much into the facts of it. These people alleged that Miss Newman's entrance into that Avis rental place down there, that he could not get in his wheelchair because of the incline. Well, I mean, tomorrow morning,
no
if you have time,
there.
we took a 4-foot ruler down there, and the bubble is in the middle.
It's not.
It is as
my
flat
wife's
as
been
they
going
can
there,
be.
and my wife carries a disabled sticker in her car, has for years, perfectly legal. She's never had any trouble at all getting in and out of there.
All the signs are in order. All the markings on the driveway.
That's
But
the
he
reason
said
I knew. I said, this is
You're right.
insane. And I said, we got to get them. And when you had called the first time, a few months back, I said, there's nothing wrong with that building. You know.
It's crazy. They're I can't speak for the other matters. And let me tell you, I'm not an ADA expert. I
Sure.
stumbled into this and tried to get up to speed on it. But I'm anything. I sure have never. I don't think I've ever had an ADA case before that. If I have, I don't remember. But
Well, I mean, an
it's
ADA
not my
is pretty.
specialty by any
It's
means.
pretty straight on.
You got to read the law. That's
Yeah,
right.
because our disabled folks now that travel around, they have access. They have wheelchair accessibility. They've got electric wheelchairs, which are fantastic.
Which they wouldn't have except for
They
that
can
law.
go
You're
places
right.
by themselves. They have a van that's it's accessible, and they spend money.
Well, I can't
You know?
speak to the other cases, but I know. I mean, I'll just say it flat up. And I hesitate. Lie is an ugly word. I don't like to call people liars and say they're but let me tell you, it's hard not to use that word. They fabricated the story against the Avis premises down here. It is as flat as can be.
I know it is.
You could lay a golf ball on that. It's not going to roll one way or the
Right.
other. It is flat. And so where this story came up about it being and being
Well, it's a
an
story.
impediment for that wheelchair
It's a story. Yeah,
is just it's bizarre, and
Right.
there's a whole lot more to this that I'll spare you the lengthy version of this tortuously long story. But she never came to Murfreesboro. We filed a request for sanctions against her. She never came. After we spent 2 hours in court down there that day, 2.5 hours, and I'm in there haranguing about how flat the area is and how she didn't properly plead it under this Rule 12 motion that we filed, and all the technicalities. In between all of those technicalities we were arguing, we were saying, it's as flat as can be, Judge. Here are the pictures. It's as flat as can be. She continued to maintain to the judge that what I was saying was, quote, just not right, whatever that meant, just not right, that it actually was. Made some odd comment to the court that
Just
my
not
client,
right.
she seriously said this, Ed. She said to the judge that Miss Newman, who had filed an affidavit, was not in a position to describe whether or not it was flat or not because she did not have legal expertise in the definitions of the ADA, and that only an ADA expert could describe what was flat for ADA purposes. Now, I'm not exaggerating that story. There's a transcript that's, again, on file for that. She said my client needed an expert to tell her what flat was. And,
I can go to get you. I've got several levels at the house. I'll be glad to loan those plumb bobs, all that stuff. I'll be glad to help her out.
I brought my 4-foot level from the workshop, and Christian and I made pictures, close-up pictures of where the bubble was, and it was right in the middle where it's supposed to be. So crazy stuff.
The whole thing,
crazy.
Yeah. And the bad part about it, it wastes a lot of people's time. And a lot of people that are running small businesses that really don't have time to waste.
Ed, the epilogue to that story is this. That's right. There are many, many, many fine attorneys out there who do specialize in ADA.
They do.
And who do gallantly stand up for the little man, gallantly stand up for the truly disabled. This kind of business model, this type of shakedown scheme, gives those good lawyers and those truly worthy ADA plaintiffs a bad name, and that's the shame to it.
I want to say on behalf of all of them, and if you'll never hear it yet, thank you for doing this, because this is something that needed to be taken care of. These are the cases you don't hear anything about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's true. And it needs to be. That's again, I'm anything but seeking publicity. I don't have time to take the cases that come in now, but I want everybody who'll listen to me to call. Call Miss Newman while you're talking to her. Check with her about her. She's a real estate lady, and if you can.
Well, they can reach you. You're at number 6 Public Square.
Number 12.
Number 12.
But
misspoke there.
Really,
12 Public Square. And I know you're not here to advertise, because you can't advertise on your station, but you can here on my show. And I strongly urge you. This man has, in the past, he's given of his time to me and my. One day, me and my brother walked in there unexpected, and we had a nice talk, and you gave of your time, and I haven't ever forgotten that.
Well,
and
honestly,
we appreciate it.
I appreciate it. The last thing in the world I need at age 77 is another case or more cases. I'm
understood.
I'm thankful for the clients I have now. Pleased with the caseload that I have now.
Right.
But like I said earlier, I don't have the energy I used to. So
I
want people to go to their lawyer, and I want their lawyer to take them on.
Sounds like Christian's about to get a lot busier.
He may.
And Claire, too, for that matter, okay? Now, you were talked to this week. You had an interview with 60 Minutes.
Well, yeah, right.
We a couple of weeks ago.
And honestly, I didn't come in prepared to tell you about that today, but it's kind of an interesting story.
Tell
since
us
you asked me about it.
You can.
I'll tell you what I can about it. And this story has an interesting backdrop. You were talking about podcasts earlier.
Right.
If anybody, any of the listeners out there want to check out this podcast, it is, to me, fascinating, not just because it focuses on my case against BP Oil down in New Orleans and in Nashville, but because it is a true David versus Goliath story. My client in it is a boat captain out of Port Cadet, Mississippi. Point Cadet, I think it is. Which is
this is a private industry, not with the Navy or anything like
he's
that.
A private boat. He takes people out fishing and does industrial work, or did industrial work till this tragedy befell him. But he was an interesting guy. As I said, if you want to bring him in here sometime and talk to him about this, he's
from what you're telling me, I probably would.
He's an interesting. I think you guys would bond. He's an interesting fellow.
Okay.
He was a roughneck down there on the oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, and went to work on the boats. And then he saved up his money. He's a smart guy, very smart, as you'll hear in a minute. And he, not much education, but he's an example that there's no correlation necessarily between education and being smart.
Using common sense too. We're back to common sense again.
He was a smart man who's used his resources wisely. But the beginning point on this story that is covered. Let me mention this. There is a company, a podcast company out of Los Angeles called American Public Media, and they have done a series of stories. 8-part series on the Deepwater Horizon explosion, with the 8th part of that focusing solely on Captain Moss's lawsuit, which is the only one that has prevailed against BP on this Corexit chemical that they use down there. But it's called Ripple, R-I-P-P-L-E. It's an 8-part series, and if you don't mind me recommending, I'd recommend you start with Part 8 first, because that's about the case in federal court in Nashville that involved me and Captain Moss. And the other first 7 parts of the series are all these poor souls who worked down there cleaning up the oil, who became contaminated with this uniquely highly toxic chemical called Corexit. The backdrop on this story, and again, stop me if I go on too much on this.
No, go right ahead. No, I'm doing something.
2010, the summer of 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, about 40 miles off Point Cadet, exploded. Several people were killed. It burned for days. Many initial injuries as a result of that. The big environmental tragedy was that it began gushing, and gushing is a modest word for it, millions of gallons of crude oil per day out of that big hole that had left there. And they couldn't cap it because it was so low. It was the deepest rig in the world, as I understand it. More than a mile down, a little over a mile down.
Okay.
So they had a heck of a time trying to cap it and to cut that off. And they tried for over 2 months before they finally were successful, with millions gushing out every day. There was so much congressional turmoil, so much publicity about it. BP was about to lose their mind. So in their corporate desperation, with the complete absence of a corporate conscience, which frequently happens, BP decides they're going to use a chemical called Corexit, spelled Corexit, which is banned in virtually every country in the world, except for a few, most of them third world countries, and the United States EPA permitted it for very limited uses under limited circumstances. Very little research.
And certainly by people that should know what they're doing.
Absolutely. So, but it's like so many of these trade-offs. This Corexit stuff, it may be deadly, but it's effective. It would hit that crude oil and it would sink it quickly to the bottom of the ocean, which is another question. I mean, what happens after it gets down there? Well, the shrimp, and they're all again, the people are eating the shrimp. But anyway, it takes it off the surface of the ocean. So BP began immediately, within a week of the explosion and the gushing, BP began pumping hundreds of thousands of gallons of this Corexit, both into the infusion site where the oil was coming out. Most of it they sprayed on the oil that had collected on top with big C-130 type airplanes.
I remember seeing the pictures.
During the same period of time, every boat captain who owned a charter boat from New Orleans to Tampa, BP brought them on, and they used these oil booms, where they oil floats.
Right.
And they look like a floaty, like your child would float on, and it corrals the oil. The idea being they would corral it, and then they would spray from the airplane in aerosol form this Corexit.
Okay.
Well, Captain Moss and his crew were among the people who worked on that. They were out there every day. They had no protective equipment. They were told by BP that Corexit is, quote, as safe as Dawn liquid soap. The stuff they put on the little ducks.
They advertise it on television.
Safe as can be, safe as can be.
Right.
Had no protective equipment. Most of them were out there in tennis shoes, flip-flops, and a pair of briefs, no shirt, no pants. It's 98 degrees, 90% humidity.
Sure.
And this Corexit's coming down on their bodies. And some people had immediate acute symptoms, serious symptoms. Some had no symptoms at all. Captain Moss and my involvement in this story skips ahead 5-6 years. BP settled all the initial injury cases where people were burned and had all these other terrible injuries from the explosion. But they knew it had come out. I don't know if you remember or not, BP had lied to Congress, and 2 or 3 of BP's senior level people were convicted of felonies for lying. BP itself was convicted of a criminal felony, something very unusual. It wasn't just fined. They were fined billions, but they were also, they paid damages, punitive damages for billions, but they also were fined criminally. So there were these findings about what they had done and all the negligence and how badly it had gone down, and kind of buried in the footnotes of these congressional records and the congressional reports on it, and the reports of the EPA and the Coast Guard and the Navy, were these things. We have great concerns about this Corexit. The European studies show that any slight contact with it at all can cause damage to the epithelial cells in the lung, to where it's what gets the oxygen from your lungs into your bloodstream.
Sure.
And so they they knew this was a bomb waiting to go off 5 to 10 years down the line. Malfunctioning livers, blood cancer.
Which explains why they settled so early with so many people.
Chemical asthma, absolutely. That's right. But here's where, another disparagement, I hate to say, of the legal profession. There's a judge down there in New Orleans, Judge Carl Barbier. New Orleans, by the way, really the entire Fifth Circuit and 11th Circuit, Florida and Louisiana, Mississippi, they are all what I would call, I'll choose my words carefully since I'd like to keep my law license a while longer. They are industry sensitive. They are pro-industry. They like the oil companies.
Sure.
From
exactly.
the smallest trial courts up to their appellate level judges. So,
and we all know this, and this is me talking now. This is not Ken Berger. These oil companies are in the politicians.
Huge contributions.
Yeah, big PAC contributions, all that. Go ahead.
Anyway, go back to about 2000. The explosion occurred in 2010. Go to about 2015, 2016, and there was this big debate down there. What do we do about all these people who we know are going to have delayed chemical asthma, delayed liver malfunctions, delayed blood cancer, all of the leukemia? We know this is coming. What do we do about it? Well, the court down there appoints this so-called plaintiffs' steering committee, and they get paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they end up selling out the plaintiffs in the worst way, the most obscene way possible. They take their millions of dollars and they literally work with the BP oil attorneys, and they prepare this masterful piece of paperwork that says that black is white and up is down and hot is cold. If you read the first 3 pages of that as a layman, it says we're going to take care of these poor oil workers who worked out here in the sun, who are developing these late-stage diseases.
Did this include your client?
Included my client. He was one of the first participants in it.
Okay.
And so he had developed chemical asthma, real severe chemical asthma. And so they developed this piece of paper that they say will guarantee that these people will be paid, when in fact, if you read the fine print, as I told the reporter from 60 Minutes a few weeks ago when I talked to him, you read the fine print, it says that you can't win. It says you can't win if you really read the fine print. And so what follows from that are 4,000, initially 4,000, they call them back-end litigation option cases, BELO. 4,000 of these things are filed by some very competent attorneys, the Downs Law Firm in Miami, and I've forgotten the Nations in New Orleans. They dropped all of them. They lost on all of those initial 4,000. Then about 2018-19, there was another flurry of activity, and from New Orleans to Galveston, New Orleans, Tampa, over to Pensacola, one summary judgment right after another shot down. I stumbled into this as a result of Captain Moss had to give up everything he was doing there, but he had inherited, I think, a little farm up here on the mountain in Sparta.
Okay.
And he was up here tending to his goats and his whatever, and he had done a really smart job of filing his own initial administrative paperwork under this BELO option. So he had preserved his rights.
He had filed his own case.
He did down there in federal court, but it was about to be thrown out. They'd sent him an order saying they were getting ready to throw it out. So he did to be thrown out. So he goes down and he takes all of his boxes of medical stuff and pleads with the judge down there to to transfer the case to Middle Tennessee. There'd never been any similar, no Deepwater Horizon cases anywhere in Tennessee. Some toxic tort cases involving TVA over in East Tennessee, but not here. So at first, BP really strongly resisted it. They said, "Oh no, we don't do that. We don't want that case. We want it to stay down here in New Orleans in friendly territory."
Sure.
But I think they got to thinking about it. We pieced that together, and they thought, he's up there in Sparta, Tennessee. He is going to hire Gomer Pyle, attorney at law, to represent him, who does not know how to handle a complex toxic tort case.
Yeah.
And which was borne out in my first telephone conversation, a laughable conversation I had with these Delaware smartasses who called me. Excuse me.
That's all right.
Initially,
no, fact is fact.
But anyway, he walks into my office without an appointment, and I take his case. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from a couple of young lawyers, sending me like they're just right out of law school, and they're they're talking to me in the most condescending, dismissive manner that you could imagine, and I've learned, you know, you hold your tongue. You get more with honey than you do with vinegar, and I was being polite to them, and they were joking about never having heard from what the hell you pronounce that Murfreesboro while the one saying the others over giggling like a teenager about not ever having heard of that little country town of Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
I'm sure.
And I thought to myself, you know, a year later, fast forward a year later, as Judge Waverly Crenshaw had soundly blew them out of court on their summary judgment motion, the first ever against BP out of Deepwater Horizon, the one and only as of this date. Captain Moss beat them on summary judgment. I beat them on summary judgment. And he was on the verge of throwing out all 6 of BP's so-called expert witnesses, leaving my expert witness, who was Dr. Vina Antony, who was the lady who had done all of the seminal research. If you go out there and do research on Corexit, you'll find 200 articles. All of those 200 articles quote Dr. Vina Antony for having done the initial research.
This was your consultant that you used.
She was my expert who testified in front of Judge Crenshaw. She's the one who put the Corexit mixed with oil on the slide with the epithelial lung cells and said there is no question about duration or time or level of exposure. Any minute exposure will damage the lungs. But anyway,
now your man also, I think you mentioned, I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but he lost a couple of his employees.
A couple of them have died with cancer. I tell you the best backdrop for this story. There is an environmental, not podcast, what do you call it, blog called The Guardian.
Okay.
If you want to really
heard of it,
you know, and I'll spare you my further droning on here about it. But go look at The Guardian and read about the incident itself and the use of Corexit itself, and predominantly about Captain Moss and his prevailing in this one case against BP.
Wow.
And as I said, the American Public Media Ripple, I don't quite understand that name, RIPPLE podcast, that they just dropped that 8th episode last week, I don't know, last Wednesday or Thursday. Associated Press is getting ready to do a series of, multiple series of stories on BP and its vast corruption.
I'll be on the lookout for it.
You know what they say about power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. BP is corrupt to the core. You know, they proved that when they lied to Congress and they were telling Congress that it was spilling 5,000 barrels a day when it was spilling closer to 500,000.
Oh, it was. We all saw the underwater.
Yeah.
I say we all saw them. I saw them, and I said, "Man, it's a lot of oil coming out of that pipeline."
Unfathomable.
Bizarre.
But those are the two good sources. And the 60 Minutes thing is supposed to air. I don't know, sometime over in the spring. They didn't tell me.
Are you on the air? They brought a camera crew with you.
They came up last week and spent about an hour with me. The one that aired last week they aired the thing that I sent you that I thought you might be interested in was aired on WWL, which is the CBS affiliate in New Orleans. It's always been a hot button topic down there in New Orleans.
I bet it is. Sure.
BP's power and corruption, and so a really nice gentleman who's one of the producers for CBS, David Hammer, Hammer.
Okay, all right.
And they aired about.
Did the reporter come and talk to you? So who was the reporter?
David Hammer.
David Hammer.
He was from the CBS affiliate in New Orleans, and he's the one who's on the 8-minute. It was about an 8-minute excerpt, mostly with.
I'm going to try and look this up. I'm sure this can be found on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on YouTube. You can if you have the cable thing where you can get the stations around the country.
Sure.
They have it preserved, down there, and they have a big section of investigations.
Right.
This guy's done his investigative reporting, and it's an interesting story. The blog, the podcast is really the most interesting thing because and I can't think of the young man's name who did that, but he does. It's like listening to a John Grisham novel. The sad, heartbreaking stories that he relates, the people who were exposed to this Corexit.
I'm sure it is. Right.
One life after another destroyed as a result of it. And BP says,
wow.
Too bad for you. Too bad for you. Most of these people are not highly educated people. Most of them are not business savvy and sophisticated.
Right, they're not.
And
you're talking mainly about Florida residents that would be there in the
mostly
the
Louisiana.
Panhandle.
Mostly Louisiana.
Yeah,
Louisiana
okay.
and southern Mississippi. Port Cadet, where Captain Moss was stationed with his charter boat, was about 40 miles due north of the Deepwater Horizon explosion.
Right.
Port Cadet is, it's probably within an hour's drive of the Louisiana border, so it's all down there in that little pocket. That I'm not familiar. Even I've never been to New Orleans. I want to go one of these days. But
I never have either. Of course, everyone wants to go see, what is it? The
Bourbon Street?
The Quarter.
Yeah.
French
Bourbon
Quarter.
Street. Yeah.
Bourbon Street and all that. But what you're talking about, this is a major news story, and it has landed right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to some extent, all because a man walked into your office and said, "Hey, I'm going to need to." He knew when he had reached his limit. He filed his own suit. That's great. That's wonderful. But he was smart enough to know, "Hey, I'm going to need somebody that knows ins and outs."
The epilogue to that story is this, and I've told the 60 Minutes people, I tell you, I didn't work any legal wizardry on that case. We won that case. We were the only ones to win for two reasons. One, they were foolish enough to let it get transferred out of their territory down there and up here to Middle Tennessee to a judge who has common sense and a strong sense of right and wrong. And the second thing is I stumbled across Vina Anthony through an old malpractice case that I had years ago. Vina Anthony and Judge Crenshaw are the ones who blew BP out of the water on that more than me and Captain Moss. But the epilogue to this story is this. They asked me what I would recommend to all of these. I started getting phone calls when this case was published last year.
Sure.
All over there. And I said, I can't, I'm old, I'm not traveling, I can't come to San Antonio, or I cannot take your case. I wish you well with it. But people say, what do you recommend?
Right.
What do you recommend? You know what my recommendation to everybody out there, there are still probably another 3,000 or 4,000 of those cases pending, these back-end litigation. My advice to all of those people is forget about it. Drop it. You're not going to win. I caught them with their pants down because they underestimated me and they underestimated. They sent down here some expert witness things that had worked in their friendly climate that I think any halfway competent lawyer would have told them would have failed in what we call the Daubert rule, and they waited too long to amend those. I let them get past that before I filed my motion to exclude it. They didn't have any choice but to discuss with us the resolution.
They had to put up with you.
So we went through a mediation, and we concluded the case on what we call confidential terms that are satisfactory to both parties. I think that's the wording we have.
Understood. Okay. I'm going to get Jackson here. We're going to get out of here in just a minute. Ken, thank you so much. We're going to wind up with
thanks for the invitation.
Our second thing of ads to take us out of the hour. Ken Berger, I want to thank you at 12 Public Square. You've been there for a while. I think, it looks like you might make it in this thing, Ken. I don't know.
What I want to make it is to the door. I need to be out of there. I need to retire. I'm tired.
Well, and I was thinking, you said sometimes in the afternoon you get a little.
Oh man, some days.
Need that nap or whatever.
I'm blaming it on the COVID. I believe that I think the final chapter on the neurological effects of that COVID monster has not yet been written.
The case you're talking about is very old, is getting old now, and COVID has not been. We don't know.
10 years from now, there'll be a National Geographic article that will tell us all we need to know about
there will
COVID.
Be. Ken Berger's been our guest. I'm Ed Raymer for the Edwin Lee Raymer Show. Jackson, thank you. We're going to play out with our series of ads here to finish us up. And once again, Ken, thanks so much.
Thanks for the invitation.
Best to
enjoy your program.
Your wonderful wife and your family. Thank you so much. And I'll tell you what, till next Sunday at 8 o'clock, I'm Ed Raymer. I'll catch you down the road. Good night.